Hello Raptors fans. Today we're going to be talking about the future, mostly due to the circumstances in the present. It's no secret that this season appears to be a write-off, with the Raptors floundering 12 games under 500. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm going to lay out the case for why the Toronto Raptors are poised to return to form as Eastern Conference contenders next season. Let's jump in. Before we get into the reasoning, let's define what I believe constitutes a contender in the NBA. Unlike other sports, where a ticket to the playoffs means that you have a decent chance of going all the way, the NBA playoffs are historically extremely deterministic. For example, no 8th-seeded team has ever won an NBA championship. And in fact, only 5 8th seeds have ever beaten a number 1 seed in the entire history of the sport. The deterministic nature of the sport in the playoffs is due to a combination of factors, including short rotations, i.e. the best players play the majority of the game, the fact that basketball has less variance than other sports due to the plethora of points scored, i.e. fluky goals don't change the outcome as much, and the nature of how a 7-game series works, where one team needs to beat the other 4 times. When you account for these factors, the better, higher-seeded teams have a higher chance of advancing than in other sports. NBA betting bookmakers do a good job of illustrating that point, as the odds to win an NBA championship are concentrated at the top and then rapidly diminish as you go down the list. Compare this to hockey, where there is a much smoother curve and more teams have at least a fighting chance to win. The point I'm trying to make is that a contender, at least in the NBA, has to be at the very least a top 4 seeded team in either conference in order for them to be considered contenders. And if we're being honest, probably a top 3 or top 2 seed. The Raptors, for the better part of the past decade, have been sitting in that position more often than not. My task today is to convince you why I believe the Raptors will return to that position as early as next season. Let's start with the justifications. Non-Raptors fans might call them excuses, but I think that there are some legit reasons that the Raptors have had a hard time this year. Firstly, let's talk Tampa. I've mentioned it in other episodes, but I think that this is a big reason why the Raptors have been so terrible this season. While the Raptors haven't been the worst team in the league at home, sitting at a 500 record, they have normally been elite, winning somewhere in the vicinity of 70 to 80% of their games at home for the past half-decade. A lot of their dominance at home is due to a combination of fantastic facilities, a league-renowned home crowd that sells out every game, and Drake. Just kidding. In Amalie Arena in Tampa, not only are the crowds sparse, they're also moribund and often heard cheering for the other team and booing the Raptors. Empty arenas aren't exactly an uncommon occurrence this season for obvious reasons, but getting absolutely zero, perhaps even negative energy from the surrounding area has taken one of the Raptors' strengths and turned it into a weakness. Others have likened the Tampa experience to having 0 home games. And when you think about it, that's actually a big deal. A lack of home court advantage sounds like a corny excuse, but home court or home field advantage is a legitimate, studied phenomenon that radically impacts games. How much does home court matter? In the 2018-2019 NBA season, the home court team won 71% of the time. 71. That is a massive, massive advantage that needs to be considered when evaluating the performance of a team. Next season, the Raptors will hopefully be back in the comfy digs of Scotiabank Arena, in front of one of the best crowds in the league, and back to their home winning ways. Now let's talk roster construction. I mentioned a few episodes ago that I didn't foresee Khem Birch moving the needle much, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. Birch has been one of the most impactful Raptors in his short time on the team, and the reason is because he has filled, admirably I might add, a role that the Raptors have desperately needed the entire season. According to 82games.com, Birch has the biggest impact on winning games, not only according to his on-off court numbers, but also his production versus his counterpart center. Aaron Baines has essentially been an anchor that has dragged the Raptors down the entire season. The Raptors needed the rebounding he provided desperately, but the cost in almost every other facet of the game was so horrendous that it was like playing shorthanded. Birch does the little stuff that doesn't show up in the box score, like making proper rotations, defending the paint by providing help, boxing out, moving without the ball on offense, stretching the floor, setting good screens, and many, many other things that the Raptors took for granted when Gasol, Ibaka, and even Jonas Valanciunas were on the team. With a proper center on the team, the Raptors' stable of great forwards and guards can do their thing. Long story short, Baines' contract can be terminated in the offseason, and they can either retain Birch or find another center that won't be as hopelessly overmatched as Baines has been this season. Now, this isn't some far-fetched alternate reality where W, X, Y, and Z all have to go right simultaneously. The Raptors literally just have to stop playing arguably the least productive player in the league 20 minutes a game and they will be a much better team. And we've seen it over the past 10 games or so. Next on the list is the emergence of OG Anunoby. This isn't even a hypothetical for next season. Anunoby has already emerged. This season, OG is averaging 16 points, 5.5 rebounds, and is shooting 40% from 3. That sounds pretty good, right? Oh, let's throw in that he's arguably the best defender in the league. What? Yes, you heard that correctly. According to bballindex.com, OG Anunoby is the most versatile defender in the league, and the second most versatile defender ever since they began keeping track of the stat. OG is a literal 5-position defender, guarding Chris Paul on one night and Nikola Jokic the next. He's a guy that will always make the right rotation, always give 100% effort defensively, and when he's fully locked in, will put offensive players in maximum security prison. Despite being asked to cover the opposing team's best players, often giving up plenty in size or in quickness, OG is still in the 92nd percentile defensively. Now that's the baseline. If OG maintains this play next season, he will be a super valuable asset that the Raptors have locked up long term. If he continues to improve like he's shown he's capable of, he's only 23, the Raptors have a star on their hands. After being asked to take on more of an offensive role with key players missing, OG didn't skip a beat, managing to up his scoring across the board without taking a hit to efficiency. Just like Siakam, OG's offensive repertoire isn't flashy or the prettiest thing to watch. He kind of rumbles his way inside and has crafty layup finishes rather than show-stopping dunks or insane crossovers, but the point is that he has become an all-around player that can meaningfully contribute on the offensive side of the ball. OG's emergence, combined with Pascal Siakam, who although he's had a down season compared to the previous two, is probably the most underrated, over-hated players in the league, and Fred VanVleet, who's an advanced stat darling, this gives the Raptors a strong win-now core that doesn't need any further seasoning in order to make an impact. Add to that the potential of Gary Trent Jr., Malachi Flynn, Chris Boucher, and likely a high lottery pick, and the ceiling gets that much higher. There are other points that could be made to contribute to this list, but I'm going to end on history. The Raptors over the past decade have been a winning organization. The front office, coaching, personnel, facilities, ownership, and fan base are all top-notch, and the Raptors have been a model for how to run an NBA franchise. Raptors fans should take this season as a reminder as to how hard it is to win a basketball game. A ball bounces out at the buzzer, a mistake in roster construction, missing players due to injury and illness. There are a lot of factors that go into a team's record at the end of the day. Take it from someone who suffered through the bad times. Poor player development, draft busts, bad coaching, disgruntled stars, flawed rosters, etc. The Raptors' situation as of right now is not as tragic as it may seem. The Raptors are a season removed from a second-place finish in the East, and 2 seasons removed from an NBA championship. The Raptors' return to relevance is not far-fetched, and I believe it is going to happen next season. And that's this week's episode. Am I being too much of a homer? Do you think the Raptors are destined to bounce back? Did I touch on the right points, or were there some I missed? I always love to hear from my viewers, and I'd like to know what you think. Please leave a comment here on YouTube or follow me on Twitter at Raptors Report. Also, please like the video and subscribe, as that helps the channel grow. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.